All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back at it again. With this approach, we're going to be talking a little bit about Gacha Smack and his take on why the TOA feels a bit mid. And so for a little bit of additional context, editor, you can put up all the screens. Gacha Smack has been on a bit of a tirade when it came to some of the critiques that he's been making about the game. I've taken a look at some of his past streams, some of his past tweets, and from my point of view, there are a couple of comments, a couple of critiques being made that aren't necessarily real, that are, in my opinion, manufactured. Let's play the video.
I wanted to take some time to delve into the Tower of Adversity and what I personally dislike about its structure and why I think it is inherently flawed. Now, keep in mind,
really want to highlight what he said at the start. This is a personal take. I think based off the fact that he's saying personal take, it's going to be very opinion related and potentially not bringing in objective facts into the reasoning. And so we'll see how far he sticks with that going into it. I like that he did the disclaimer up front that this is his personal reasoning regarding this.
I am somebody who did play Genshin Impact for a couple years, and I've also played Wuthering Waves. And I think it is an objective statement to say that Wuthering Waves quite literally took the canvas as well as the painting on the canvas and said, let's just put our signature on it and call it Tower of Adversity.
To summarize that, I believe he's saying that a lot of the Genshin influence is very apparent in the TOA game mode. And that means maybe there's lack of creativity, something along those lines.
They took their Tower of Adversity and straight up derived it from Spiral Abyss in Genshin Impact. I want to tackle the first problem I have personally with this. One, I played Spiral Abyss for 2 years straight in Genshin Impact, so no matter what they did with their Tower of Adversity, that is an exact foundation, more than the foundation, it's also the goddamn tree branches too, of Spiral Abyss. There's gonna be a diminishing enjoyment for me because I've been there, I've seen that show, I bought the ticket, right? Numerous times. I can only enjoy it so much because I already did it so much. So there's no innovative quality here with this in-game mode.
First take right off of the bat is that because he's played Genshin Impact's endgame for 2 years, he immediately cannot find enjoyment in the TOA because there are some similarities. It is objectively wrong to say that both of the game modes are exactly the same. Just getting that out there right away.
Here's the real problem I have. I enjoyed Spiral Abyss, and a lot of people who are bitter towards Genshin Impact, they don't want to admit that. Spiral Abyss, admittedly, was one of the craziest fucking cooks I've seen in my entirety of my gaming tenure.
Is this basically him saying that Spiral Abyss was like the best game mode in Gacha gaming? Let's hone in on that a little bit further because that is slightly diabolical.
I was like, wow, man, they took this combat system with this 3-man approach with the element swap, the ultimate, and they made it beautiful with that Spiral Abyss. Why was it fun though? Let's examine, let's peel back the layers and examine the intricacies of this. Well, first, you're on a time that creates competitiveness and a little bit of stress.
With his take over here, we are quite adjacent to a lot of the stuff that we heard in the Gacha cast. The Gacha cast opinion was that having a time limit was a negative for the game mode. And what we're hearing from Gacha Smack right now is that the time limit is a positive for the game mode because it added this extra stress, this extra limitation to potentially learn the mechanics of the game and execute on them properly. I think that's what he's referring to by mentioning all of those things with like elemental bursts, skills, etc., etc.
Good stress, not bad stress, but the ability to want to get in that time limit to complete. That's cool, I like that. But the element of the Spiral Abyss that was enjoyable as a Genshin Impact player that played in-game was the fact that as soon as you press start, you had full fucking power with your characters. Your ults were already up. You don't have an intro skill or a Forte circuit in Genshin Impact. So your ults being up quite literally was you at 100% power. This enabled you to be able to efficiently get through your rotations with whatever teams you were utilizing, regardless of whether the pilot was on the field the majority of the time or you were running quick swap.
He's claiming that in Genshin Impact, you have all of the resources necessary to just go through all of your rotations, to just build up all of this stuff. There is a lot of contradictory stuff, even from like recent releases, that we can do against this, or that we can use to argue against this. The comparison here that's being made to WuWa is that there's an issue with the fact that your Concerto energy isn't full. You can't necessarily go in, immediately start swapping, and have your full rotation just out there right at the start. This is one of the first examples. Hu Tao is at full strength when she's below 50% HP. She's at 100% HP when she starts the tower. Second, Verina, she requires HP consumption to reach full power, and so she doesn't apply either. And Kazuha requires you to swirl to apply the buffs to reach full power. So there are plenty of characters that require you to on-field them and do things with them on-field to maximize the damage of the team. And so this whole argument that you're at full power is almost implying that all of your buffs are active the second you enter the game mode. I think of any team in the game, that's just not true. It's just objectively not true. So I'm a little bit confused by this argument. I'm a little bit confused by this reasoning. You don't even have full energy from every consecutive chamber. You start at 0 energy when you move from chamber 1 to 3. And so Genshin, when you get to the second part of like a floor, right? You don't have full energy. You have whatever you started off with. WuWa has 4 sections. It carries over, right? So you can end with full energy and then start with full energy. And so if anything, WuWa has more resetting and more of this full power dynamic than he's talking about. You're maxed out. You have 100% everything. Genshin quite literally doesn't have that. And so this full power argument is also just completely objectively wrong. We are manufacturing problems about Wuthering Waves to make it look worse than other games.
What happened here with Wuthering Waves is they derivatively took this system, put it in their game, and one-to-one'd it. They just changed up, they did a little bit of paint here, a little bit of paint here. Oh, we're gonna do the point system where you can't use the same character once you run out of points. Oh, we're gonna like change the buff to where you can now have 3 teams. Oh, we're gonna like make it to where you have all element increase in the middle, whatever. It changed up a few things, right? But still relatively the same system. Here's my problem.
Based off the own reasoning that he gave earlier in the video, it's completely false.
Well, here's the problem. When you copy somebody, you kind of like oust yourself, because if you don't really know the formula and understand it comprehensively, you can make a mistake and then you end up looking goofy, right? This Wuthering Wave situation reminds me of that, because you copied Spiral Abyss, but you didn't realize that your Forte circuit and your intro skill makes it to where it actually is counterintuitive to the Spiral Abyss. You don't start off with 100% power in Tower of Adversity.
You quite literally do. Your HP refreshes, your Resonance Energy refreshes. Those values in Genshin Impact are quite literally carried over from stage to stage. There are characters like Chang Li, where entering into the first stage of the tower with like multiple Forte stacks could be adjacent to what you actually want to do. Because there's a lot of people that start off a rotation with a Chang Li resonance skill to activate the fusion set buff and then immediately use their liberation to go from 0 to 4 stacks. There are strategies in the tower where you do that. And so having additional Forte stacks, having certain values carry over can sometimes be actually a negative for the team comp and the character that you're playing, because you will quote unquote waste resources in the clear. And having full Concerto as well would actually make it impossible to do things like echo swap cancels. On a character like Jian, hypothetically, you would swap cancel to optimize your rotation and give greater uptime on the buff, or shorten your rotation time during your most damaging part of your liberation, because you wouldn't have to echo skill first to do it. It also limits your ability to quick swap and time your outro buffs. There are a lot of abilities that require setup, a lot of Sonata skills that require setup to activate properly. And so by not having Concerto energy to build up, you limit the ability to set up for many teams in many rotations.
You start off with 70% power. That's why the only damn support in the game that feels good with the mode is the support that's able to start off 100% like almost instantaneously. That's Verina.
It is a very odd take to say that Verina is the only support character that feels good in the tower. Shorekeeper feels very good and very strong, and she is quite literally my favorite character to play on every single team. Obviously, that's my opinion, but the delay is not the worst thing ever. You simply prefer teams where you can get onto your other characters faster.
Her Forte circuit, her intro, and her fucking ultimate in like 2 seconds.
That's true. Verina objectively has the fastest rotation time in the game, especially when she's S2. She will take quite literally maybe 1 to 2 seconds to get full Concerto and then be able to swap off and then buff your team. That is one of her strengths. Shorekeeper, on the other hand, has a much more delayed rotation that takes a bit more time, can be optimized with more finesse with some of her animation cancels, but she provides much larger buffs that will, in some ways, enable your team to actually do more damage. So there is simply a trade-off between the characters. One is faster rotation and faster buffs, the other is slower rotation but stronger buffs. In my opinion, at least, that is a balanced game.
Fits the needs of the Spiral Abyss in order to make that concept work flawlessly. She fits it perfectly. But what about characters who don't have their Forte circuit? What about characters who don't have their intro and who can't get them up quickly? they are inherently going to fall into the clunky category when you're playing Tower of Adversity and you're pressing start the button. The problem here is,
I would imagine that since he did not talk about Shorekeeper in the example, he is calling Shorekeeper clunky. I don't think that's true. I think he perhaps has not played her enough to, learn how to play her. I know another content creator who has not learned how to play Shorekeeper either. Blue Clear Stellar Realms, ladies and gentlemen.
you tried to one-to-one a system that is built for no intro and no Forte circuit. And so when I come into these battles, if I don't use Verina, it just feels fucking weird.
He's entitled to his opinion. I think Shorekeeper feels great to play. I have my best clear times with her. She is one of the most valued members of my roster, and I am a person that regularly does 1 minute Tower of Adversity clears with 1.0 characters like Jian.
This is the problem with copying somebody else versus saying, what mode can we build that's gonna suit the intricacies and the mechanical savviness of our combat? What mode can we build that's gonna suit our combat perfectly? Not theirs, our combat perfectly. And I think this is one of my gripes with Tower of Adversity. It fits Genshin Impact's combat mechanisms perfectly. It doesn't fit Wuthering Waves' beautiful, by the way, better combat mechanisms. It doesn't fit its combat mechanisms perfectly.
Why does it not fit the combat mechanisms of the Wuthering Waves gameplay? Because the idea of Wuthering Waves, and I think the big differentiation of it compared to Genshin Impact, is the fact that in Wuthering Waves, you actually have to play every character on your team. You have to actually use their skills. You have to actually basic attack with them. You actually have to run their rotations to be able to apply their buffs and then move on and then cycle through the rest of your team. In a game like Genshin Impact, you quite literally will just press 1 or 2 buttons with a character and then not use them again for 20 seconds. There are many characters who are an EQ bot. There are some characters who are just an E bot. You have mechanics like parries. You have mechanics like dodges. Dodges generate Concerto energy. One of the biggest optimizations for a character like Shorekeeper is opening the rotation with her and then having her dodge every attack possible from the boss to speed up her first rotation. That is a pretty basic concept for the Tower of Adversity. Again, it fits in with how the game plays because the Tower of Adversity is on a time limit. And so you now get rewarded for actively using the mechanics of the game like dodging to generate Concerto energy faster and speed up your rotations, allowing you to do more damage within the time limit. And so I do believe that having 0 Concerto at the start is quite literally working with the mechanics of the game because it incentivizes you to use dodges and speed up your rotation, rewarding you for skill and mastery of the game's mechanics. That is why the time limit is good in Wuthering Waves.
So you guys got lazy in my eyes. I'm like, you could have cooked something better with that perfect dodge.
Smack, I think that your take is lazy. Frankly, I don't think you attempted to even see where the benefits could be from this system because you're not mentioning things like dodges generating Concerto. You simply didn't mention them when it's something that speeds up your rotations and rewards you for playing the game's mechanics.
With that parry, with that Forte circuit and that intro coming in, you need to transform your Tower of Adversity to better adhere and synergize with those mechanisms.
We quite literally just broke down how the design of the Tower of Adversity with 0 Concerto heavily promotes you learning the mechanics of the game because you will get rewarded clear faster and be able to get more rewards if you master those mechanics.
It doesn't feel good pressing the start button and I have to build up my Forte circuit and I have to build up my intro skill when we're using Genshin's formula, which is starting off at 100% power. Chat, do you feel like I'm being unreasonable here? Because this is all my own personal experience. Now I actually want to hear what you guys have to say.
I believe that we have dismantled every single point he's made. Yes, yep. Any disagreeers with what I'm saying? Any disagreeers at all? Let's continue.
Because that has always been my scrutiny for it. This is facts. The energy is dog shit. I agree with you. I'm looking for a disagreement if there is one. They can yoink.
When you ban every single person who expresses the slightest disagreement, which we've seen like proof of, this is kind of what happens. I make sure to hear people out, refute their points, and if they refuse to listen to reason after I refute their points, then I ban them. That is the difference between how him and I ban people on our channels. And I think it's a big one.
Illusive Realm and put it in TOA. Yep, I think I like that idea. It's just you have to be more specific. WuWa has been amazing gameplay wise for sure. The story's another thing for me. I have nonstop spam skip. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. And that's fine. To each his own. Yeah, WuWa Parry is worse than ZZZ. I always feel bad to play. Parry is too much of a factor. 100% agree. And how I felt with both games in the Gacha War.
I just want to expand on that Parry take in ZZZ. I think that being forced to switch your character and not being able to parry with the on-field character is, personally, I don't think that's good. You're entitled to your opinion on that, but I genuinely don't. I think it's weird that you can't parry with your on-field character when parrying with the person on-field is how parries were integrated in every single other game ever that has had parries. ZZZ is the only game in the history of games where you cannot parry with your on-field character. Obviously, there are some characters that can, but it's like the only one I've ever seen. Maybe somebody can prove me wrong, but at least the 1.0 roster and the 1.1 roster as well, you couldn't really parry with anybody on-field.
All I'm trying to say is this is not factual. This is opinionated.
That's another thing we have to factor in, guys. He prefaced this by saying everything is his opinion, but we are entitled to saying that his opinion doesn't make very much sense and that his opinion is formulated due to his misunderstanding of the game or his lack of motivation to actually learn the game's mechanics and apply them to the game mode. We are justified in doing that.
Wuthering Waves fucked up trying to copy the foundation as well as some of the tree limbs of Genshin Impact because their formula is not a one-to-one with that infrastructure. Genshin Impact's combat isn't as intricate as Wuthering Waves.
True.
And so because of that, you got to understand that their business plan was tied to that. Your business plan is not tied to that because you decided to throw in a parry, a fucking perfect dodge, and a Forte circuit and an intro. That already transformed your combat to another realm, to the point where the end game now has to suit that.
I am very glad that he brought up the mechanics like dodges, parry, Concerto, because they all work together hand in hand. The tower, the time limit, and you having 0 Concerto, 0 Forte, whatever it is, all of those mechanics will speed up your character's rotation when they are executed. And so having this time limit where those resources start off at 0 rewards you for playing the game well, makes your rotations faster, and causes you to do more damage in the long run and clear more efficiently. There are specific characters like Dan Jin, where the dodge counters are quite literally the strongest part of their kit. Dan Jin's dodge counter, with her inherent ability, will basically generate a huge amount of Concerto, do more damage, and speed up her rotation significantly, letting her do a max damage Chaos Cleave much faster than just using her Resonance skill at a baseline. What that means, right, is that when Danjin is soloing and she's spamming the dodge counters, she's using the strongest part of her kit, generating a lot of Forte, and then getting out a lot more maxed out Chaos Cleaves. And that's why she's one of the best solo characters in the game.
On the bright side, your Hologram Fights suited fucking perfectly. Your Hologram Fights, that's your cook, and I know it is, because that's the only thing that makes sense with your combat system in your endgame.
Hologram bosses are kind of just like fun sort of endgame content. You're able to also use things like food and revives in it. And it also doesn't refresh. It's also a one-time clear. And so it's like entirely different framing where in the tower, you have a bit more of like a standardized game mode, right? Where everything is kind of starting off at a baseline level and you're only looking at your investment in the game, your investment in your characters. And with a hologram, you're basically able to like, in a sense, activate cheats, right? You can activate cheats if you want to, but for holograms to really have a standardized level of difficulty, you would have to create your own limitations and not use the tools that you have available. So I don't view that as like a endgame from that sense of like accomplishment, because to get the sense of accomplishment that you get from TOA in holograms, you would have to basically put limitations on yourself.
The Illusive Realm kind of just feels like, you know, you get your power. It doesn't make sense with your combat, and it's not supposed to. It's supposed to just feel like I'm so fucking strong, I will shit on anything. And I like that about the Illusive Realm. I genuinely do.
He's right on the Illusive Realm. You build up power, you get your characters absolutely overpowered by the end of it. First couple of stages are actually typically the hardest parts of the Illusive Realm. As you build up those buffs and as you continue moving from stage to stage, it progressively, honestly, gets easier. And of course, there's strategy involved with picking the right buffs, maxing out your Echo Sonata buffs from all the different metaphors you're getting, but it kind of does, if you build it properly, it isn't that crazy by the end of it. And the damage numbers are so high, you have to turn them off, otherwise you get a seizure.
You don't really have a true endgame to suit the needs of your combat mechanisms, and that's my biggest gripe.
The TOA perfectly encapsulates the mechanics of Wuthering Waves and rewards you very well for mastering them and applying them in combat.
How do we fix this? I'm gonna be honest with you, that it's above my pay grade. My job isn't to tell you how to fix your end game. And if it was, I'd hope I'd be getting paid good for it. It's not. That's up for you guys to figure out. You cook.
The game mode is bad, but I don't know why. Awesome critique.
I didn't. I'm just gonna tell you, I don't really like how that shit feels. Normally, I believe in providing a solution, but in this case, above my fucking pay.
You can't. You're making stuff up because you don't understand the game. You've been doing it for the past couple of days. There are receipts, there is proof of it, and this is just another notch on the wall.
I'm not here to think about what you need to do with your game. I'm just here to provide the feedback. WuWa shouldn't have tried to recreate Abyss. I think that something like the Infinite Tower from TOF would have fit better. True, they should just make a hologram in-game low-key. TOA for the launch of the game was good to test the full power of your account. Well, no, it wasn't, Dark. Okay, we got to talk about that. TOA for the launch of the game was not good. It's never good. Even the Spiral Abyss isn't good.
He said at the start of the video that the Spiral Abyss was the best game mode he had ever played.
Spiral Abyss was one of the craziest cooks I've seen in my entirety of my gaming tenure.
Spiral Abyss isn't good. It's a good wake-up call, right? So I guess that's a bit of a support to what your statement's saying. But the problem with these gacha games intrinsically is that when you go into the Tower of Abyss at the launch of the game, you're not even like proper level. So it gives a false perception that the end game is that challenging. And then what happens? As time progresses, you eventually meet the requirements, and now
Why are people soloing with Danjin, a one-person team? Why are people soloing with Chisha? Why are people two-manning it? Wouldn't that imply that there clearly isn't a need to reach this level of investment that you and many other content creators have been pushing out to all of their audiences and saying that this is just a gear check, that this is just an investment check, it's just a time check or commitment check, when there is so much evidence to the contrary? It's just publicly available online. It would take one search on YouTube to refute every claim that you're making here. To me, it just shows a staggering lack of effort or care when we're making critiques like this.
oh, this shit ain't hard. I thought it was difficult. They were saying this game was going to be tough. It's not. So I don't think TOA is actually good for the launch of a game. It's more so good after the first two patches. So once you actually have a team established.
To be fair, though, he is making a point about how at the launch of the game, it was not the best from that perspective. I do agree that trying to do the level 100 TOA with like level 60, 70, or 80 characters, which was where you were at in the launch of the game, that was not that hard. But there were some people that were able to do it by mastering the mechanics of the game. And frankly, that's a situation for basically every game. And so maybe that whole Abyss point that he was making was that Abyss felt bad in the early stages, and maybe I was not fully comprehending that. So I just want to clarify that if Gacha Smack said that for 1.0, the early patches of Genshin, the Spiral Abyss was bad, I can agree with that. And that is not actually contradicting the take he made at the start of the video.
He put something else. I can see your point, but I think building the Forte last intro is meant to be quite important. I agree on this. Listen, I'm not disagreeing with that, Valorum. I'm telling you that doesn't make sense with TOA. It doesn't, because TOA is not TOA, it's Spiral Abyss.
There are many differentiations in the TOA, like you being able to freely slot characters, the existence of the middle tower that allows the entire roster to retain viability in the long run. So there are many differentiations that we are simply not listing here to push a narrative that is very negative towards WuWa.
Called it TOA. And Spiral Abyss is for Genshin's mechanics. But I agree, it is important to build them up. So that's why you shouldn't even have the TOA. Unless you want to put that in there. But if they put that in there, it's going to make certain characters like, dude, Chang Li, if you start off with Forte Circuit and intro on a Chang Li team, Chang Li is better than every character in the game, because now the bitch goes Forte, ult Forte is immediately and then builds it up again. So certain characters are going to be offset in terms of balancing, right?
That would not be good, because then she wouldn't have any buffs from your healer if you did that. Even like Verina's attack buff or like the rejuvenating glow set buff, if you just raw dogged the TOA start by doing that on Chang Li, you would like cut your DPS in like half.
If you start Wuthering Waves off at 100% power, some characters are going to benefit from that so much fucking harder than other characters, because they...
So isn't this a reason not to do that? Why dismantle your own point? Like, what? I'll accept the argument against your reasoning.
Actually revolve around that. And again, that adds to my argument that TOA is not built for Wuthering Waves mechanisms.
I don't think it adds to your argument. I think it just shows that your solution of having everything start at full energy would be quite literally worse for the balance of the game, which is like, I think making a change that actively unbalances the game is bad. That's just my viewpoint, though. And remember, this is his opinion.
Currently. Now, they can transform it, but yeah, I don't know. Let me scroll down, see if anybody else said anything else. They should make a swarm in-game. Wait, I think you meant swarm. You said swam, but I'm gonna assume you meant swarm. In-game mode, just survive endlessly waves of progressively harder enemies, change buffs and landscapes as it goes on getting harder. I'll be honest, I don't feel like horde modes like that translate well into action RPGs. I feel like they translate more. I've said this before. I feel like they translate better in Call of Duty, where you actually can go and pick up like weapons and stuff. The survival, just the whole infrastructure of it makes more sense with shooters and looters than it does with, you know what I mean? Like you're just gonna get kind of like tired of doing that, in my personal opinion.
All right, guys. So my end thought about this whole video, this kind of critique about Wuthering Waves, is that it's kind of continuing the trend for me in terms of like disingenuous critiques about the game. Because a lot of the points that he brought up are just instantly refutable by simply learning the mechanics of the game and executing on them. The fact that dodge counters give you more Concerto, the fact that they speed up your rotations, starting at 0 means that by using the mechanics of the game, once again, you get better. You'll get better results. And so having an endgame mode that rewards you for using all of the mechanics that are built into the game, to me, is a good endgame mode. There are a lot of creators that participate in creating Hoyoverse related content. And these creators are terrified of critiquing any Hoyoverse game at any capacity without also kind of shitting on WuWa at the same time. Because otherwise, they will be labeled a Kuro bot and a Kuro shill. And that means that they can't actually give a balanced take regarding Wuthering Waves. And this is what it leads to. Let me know what you think about this react. Let me know what you think about my points, whether I'm being fair or unfair. I think that I've had a really great technical analysis of all of his points. Gacha Smack even sort of dismantled his argument at the end. Let me know in the comments.